I've never been good at starting things. Endings, those I understand. The firm handshake at the conclusion of a parent-teacher conference, the satisfying thud of closing a book, the bittersweet relief of signing divorce papers after years of trying to breathe life into something that had long since died. But beginnings? They terrify me. There's too much unknown, too much possibility for disappointment. Then, Andrew King walked into my life, and everything I thought I knew about myself at this stage of life was suddenly up for questioning. It was at the EdTech conference last October. The air outside had that particular Chicago crispness that always reminds me why I stay in this city, despite the brutal winters. That perfect balance between summer's sticky heat and winter's punishing cold. Inside the convention center, I was just another education professional in sensible shoes, notebook in hand, there to scout innovations that might benefit our perpetually underfunded public school. Andrew was the last presenter before lunch, a young software developer talking about an adaptive learning platform his startup had created. I remember watching him take the stage with that easy confidence of tech people who truly understand their creation. He didn't look like the other presenters in their business casual attire. He wore jeans and a faded Radiohead t-shirt under an unstructured blazer, his light brown hair slightly disheveled, as if he'd run his hands through it multiple times before walking on stage. Education shouldn't be one size fits all, he began, and something in his voice, deep, thoughtful, passionate, made me sit up straighter. Every student learns differently, and our software adapts in real time to how each student processes information. For the next 30 minutes, I found myself completely absorbed in his presentation. Not just because the software seemed promising for our struggling students, but because Andrew himself was so compelling. He spoke about education with the reverence of someone who understood its power to transform lives. He wasn't just selling a product, he genuinely cared about the problems he was trying to solve. After his talk, I joined the small crowd that had gathered around him with questions. I waited until the others had dispersed before approaching him. "Mr. King?" I said, extending my hand. "Evelyn Pierce, principal at Westridge High School. I was impressed with your adaptive learning model." His handshake was firm, his blue eyes focusing entirely on me, as if we were the only two people in the room. "Thanks for waiting," he said. "And please, call me Andrew." We ended up talking for nearly an hour, well past the start of the next session, about the challenges facing urban schools, about how technology could help but would never replace good teachers, about the frustrating disconnect between policymakers and classroom realities. He listened to my experiences with a genuine curiosity that I found refreshing. Most people's eyes glaze over when I start talking about educational equity and standardized testing. "This might sound forward," he said, as we finally prepared to part ways. "But I'd love to continue this conversation sometime. Our team is always looking for input from education leaders who are in the trenches." I found myself agreeing before I'd even processed the invitation. We exchanged business cards, mine official and school issued, his a minimalist design with just his name, email, and the company logo. I didn't expect him to actually follow up. Men like Andrew, young, brilliant, with the world at their feet, don't typically seek out the company of school principals approaching 50. But 3 days later, an email appeared in my inbox. "Evelyn, it was great meeting you at the conference. Your insights about classroom implementation were invaluable. My team is putting together a focus group of educators next month, and I'd love for you to participate if you're interested. Also, completely unrelated to work, I'm going to a small concert at the Hideout this Friday, local jazz quartet that's supposed to be amazing. If you enjoy jazz and are free, I'd love for you to join me. No pressure either way." Andrew, I read the email at least 10 times, analyzing every word like one of my English teachers dissecting a poem. Was this a professional invitation with a casual addition, or was he actually asking me out? And why was my heart racing at the possibility? I told myself it was professional networking as I typed my response, accepting both invitations. I told myself it was about the music when I found myself taking more care than usual getting dressed on Friday evening, opting for a deep purple wrap dress I hadn't worn in years. I told myself many things, none of which explained the nervous energy coursing through me as I walked into the hideout, scanning the dimly lit room for his face. He was at a small table near the stage, and the smile that lit up his face when he saw me made something long dormant stir inside me. The band was indeed excellent, a quartet playing modern interpretations of classic jazz standards. But what I remember most about that evening was the easy flow of our conversation during breaks in the music. Andrew had a way of listening that made me feel heard in a way I hadn't experienced in years, maybe ever. He asked questions about my life, my work, my passions, and seemed genuinely interested in the answers. "Why education?" he asked as we shared a plate of appetizers. "What drew you to it?" No one had asked me that question in a very long time. Most people in my life had always known me as an educator. It was simply who I was. "I had this teacher in ninth grade, Mrs. Okonkwo," I told him. "I was going through a rough time at home, parents divorcing, typical teenage angst, and I was acting out in class. Instead of sending me to detention, she kept me after school and asked me what I was passionate about." I smiled at the memory. No adult had ever asked me that before. When I said I loved stories, she gave me a copy of Their Eyes Were Watching God and said, "This changed my life when I was your age. Let's see what it does for you." Andrew leaned forward, completely engaged. "And did it change your life?" "It did. Not just the book, though it's still one of my favorites. It was being seen by someone who didn't have to care. I decided then that I wanted to do that for other kids someday." When he walked me to my car at the end of the night, there was a moment, just a heartbeat really, where I thought he might kiss me. Instead, he gently squeezed my hand and thanked me for coming. I drove home with my mind racing, telling myself I was being ridiculous. He was just being friendly. He was 17 years younger than me. He was probably like this with everyone. But then came the texts, the invitations to hikes in nearby forest preserves, cooking classes where we laughed at our failed attempts at French cuisine, quiet evenings where he introduced me to indie films I'd never heard of, while I introduced him to classic literature he'd somehow missed. Each time, I told myself it was just friendship, just two people with some common interests enjoying each other's company, until the night that changed everything. We had spent the afternoon walking through Jackson Park, the November air crisp but not yet bitter, the last stubborn leaves clinging to the trees. We were discussing some novel we'd both read. I don't even remember which one now, when Andrew suddenly stopped walking. "Evelyn," he said, his voice softer than usual, "I need to tell you something, and I'm afraid it might mess up this friendship we've built." My heart stuttered. This was it. He'd met someone his own age, someone without the baggage of a failed marriage and decades of set-in-stone habits. Someone whose body wasn't betraying the first subtle signs of age. "You can tell me anything," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "That's what friends are for." Andrew took a deep breath, his blue eyes holding mine with an intensity that made me shiver. "I don't want to be just your friend anymore. I've fallen for you. Your mind, your strength, your passion for what you do, the way you see the world." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I'd come to recognize as a sign of nervousness. "I know there are probably 100 reasons why this is a bad idea, but I couldn't keep pretending that's all I feel." I stood there, speechless, as 1,000 thoughts crashed through my mind. The age difference, what my colleagues would think, what his friends would say. The fact that I was so recently out of a 20-year marriage that had left me doubting everything I thought I knew about love. "Andrew," I finally managed, "I'm 49 years old." A small smile played at the corner of his mouth. "I'm aware of that. You're 32. Also accurate. I'm a high school principal. I wear sensible shoes and go to bed by 10 most nights." He stepped closer, taking my cold hands in his warm ones. "Evelyn, I know who you are. That's why I'm standing here making a complete fool of myself. Because who you are is exactly who I want." When he kissed me, there in the gathering twilight with dried leaves crunching beneath our feet, it felt like waking up from a long, dreamless sleep. Like coming home to a place I'd never been before. That was 6 months ago. Since then, we've been building something I never expected to find at this stage of my life. Something that defies easy categorization or explanation. something that makes me feel simultaneously more vulnerable and more secure than I've ever felt. Of course, it hasn't been without complications. The first time Andrew joined me for dinner with my closest friends, other educators I've known for years, I could see the questions in their eyes, the careful assessment of this man, so clearly younger than us. To his credit, Andrew navigated the evening with grace, engaging everyone in meaningful conversation, showing genuine interest in their stories. By dessert, even skeptical Margaret had warmed to him, pulling me aside as we cleared plates to whisper, "Well, he's certainly not what I expected, but I haven't seen you smile like this in years." Then there was the first time I met his friends, a group of tech professionals and musicians who gathered for weekly game nights. I felt every one of my 49 years as I walked into that apartment, full of people who could have been my students. I was sure they were judging me, this older woman who had somehow captured their friend's attention. But as the night progressed, as I relaxed enough to reveal my competitive side during a heated round of Settlers of Catan, I discovered something surprising. Age mattered far less than I'd feared. We found common ground in conversations about music, politics, books we'd read, and places we'd traveled. "See?" Andrew said as he walked me home that night. "They loved you." "They were being polite," I insisted. He laughed. "Evelyn, Zach invited you to join his D&D campaign. He doesn't even let me play in it." Not everyone has been so accepting, of course. My ex-husband, Jason, was predictably condescending when he found out through mutual friends. "Bit of a midlife crisis, isn't it?" He'd said during one of our infrequent phone calls about selling our old house. "Dating someone who was probably in diapers when we got married?" The comment stung more than I wanted to admit. Was that how others saw our relationship? As some pathetic attempt to recapture my youth? The thought plagued me for days afterward, until Andrew noticed my unusual quietness one evening as we cooked dinner together in my small kitchen. "What's going on in that beautiful mind?" he asked, bumping my hip gently with his as he reached for the salt. When I reluctantly shared Jason's comment and my fears, Andrew put down the wooden spoon he was holding and turned to face me fully. "Evelyn," he said, his voice serious, "I need you to hear something. I'm with you because you challenge me intellectually, because you make me laugh, because you care so deeply about your students and your work. I'm with you because when I'm having a bad day, you're the person I want to talk to. I'm with you because when I picture my future, you're in it." He cupped my face in his hands. "Not some idealized version of you, not some fantasy about older women. Just you, exactly as you are. It's moments like those that remind me why I took this risk. Why, despite all the practical considerations and societal raised eyebrows, I chose to open myself to this unexpected love. Not that it's been easy. We've had our share of challenges beyond the age gap. Andrew's work schedule can be chaotic, with late nights coding to meet deadlines. My job demands consistent early mornings and a professional demeanor at all times. We've had to work to find rhythm in our different worlds. Then there are the more mundane differences. His preference for staying up late playing video games while I'm usually ready for sleep by 10. My collection of vinyl records versus his digital music library. His easy adoption of new technology while I still prefer printed books and handwritten notes. But we're learning to dance in these in-between spaces, finding joy in the contrast rather than frustration. He's introduced me to indie games that have surprising narrative depth. I've taught him the pleasure of Sunday morning gardening, dirt under fingernails, and the satisfaction of seeing something bloom under your care. Last month, during spring break, Andrew surprised me with a trip to Starved Rock State Park. We hiked through canyons carved from sandstone, the melting winter creating magical waterfalls around every turn. In a secluded spot overlooking the Illinois River, Andrew pulled me close. "You know what I love about being with you?" he said, his breath warm against my ear. "You've lived enough to know what matters and what doesn't. You don't waste time on drama or games. You're so fully yourself." I laughed softly. "That's a very kind way of saying I'm old." "No," he said firmly. "It's a very accurate way of saying you're wise, and that wisdom is sexy as hell." Later that night, as we lay in our cabin with moonlight streaming through the windows, Andrew traced patterns on my bare shoulder. "Move in with me," he said quietly. I turned to look at him, searching his face for any sign of hesitation or doubt. "Are you sure?" "That's a big step." He nodded. "I've never been more sure of anything. I love you, Evelyn. I want to build a life with you." Those words, "build a life with you," they've been echoing in my mind ever since. Because that's what we're doing, isn't it? Building something new together, something that doesn't fit neatly into conventional boxes or follow expected timelines. Yesterday, I gave notice to my landlord. Next month, I'll move into Andrew's loft in Wicker Park, a space that somehow manages to blend his modern aesthetic with room for my beloved books and plants. It's another beginning, another leap into the unknown. I still have moments of doubt, of course. Late at night, I sometimes find myself wondering if I'm being selfish, if I'm holding Andrew back from the conventional life path he might follow with someone his own age. Children are likely not in our future, a choice I made peace with years ago, but that he hasn't had to fully consider until now. When I voiced these concerns, Andrew looked at me with those clear blue eyes that see right through to my core. "Evelyn," he said gently, "do you think I haven't thought about all of this? Do you think I would choose this? Choose us, if it wasn't what I truly wanted?" And that's the heart of it, isn't it? Choice. The everyday, we choose each other, across the divisions of age and background and life experience. Every day, we choose to build this unconventional love in a world that doesn't always have a framework for understanding it. I don't know what the future holds for us. I don't know if the passion we feel now will weather the inevitable storms of life, or if the differences between us will someday become insurmountable rather than enriching. I don't have any guarantees, any more than anyone does in matters of the heart. But I do know this. At 49, I've learned that life rarely follows the paths we expect. That sometimes, the most beautiful chapters come after what we thought was the end of the story. And that love, real love, doesn't always arrive in the packages we've been taught to expect. So here I am, packing up books and clothes, preparing to move in with a man 17 years my junior, starting a new beginning when I thought all my beginnings were behind me. Terrified, yes, but also more alive than I've felt in decades. Maybe that's what love is, in the end. Not the safe harbor I once thought I wanted, but the courage to set sail again. The willingness to be surprised by joy, even when, especially when, it comes in unexpected forms. And if that's true, then I'm exactly where I need to be. In between seasons, yes, but also exactly where I belong.